Mary wanted to run, but she made herself be quiet, and she made herself get low. The whistling assaulted her, following her up corridors and down pathways. Sometimes he was in front of her, sometimes he was behind her, but it was pretty clear that he was stalking her. There were others, because aren't there always, and he clearly found them. They screamed, they begged, and they died. Mary kept going, kept hoping for a way out, but the longer she went, the less likely it seemed. The halls were deteriorating, melting like wax candles, and the lights had begun to flicker. It was a true haunted house now, and as Mary slunk along, she kept her eyes peeled for her whistling stalker. She peeked around the corner, looking for the whistler, but what she found was a dark hallway with no discernible floor. Instead, there were small lights along the sides of the walls, and Mary slipped a hand along the wall so she wouldn't get lost in that surrounding murk. She slid her feet along like a tightrope walker, always preparing for the moment when the ground would go out from under her and she would fall like Alice down the rabbit hole. All the while, that maddening whistling followed her, no matter where she went. The screams had stopped not so long ago, but this was the first time Mary realized how quiet the haunted house was. She could be the last one left, or she could have just moved beyond whoever else was left. Mary found that she didn't much care. She just wanted to get out of here. She wanted to go home, to get under her covers and feel safe in a way that she hadn't since she was very small. She wanted to run into her parents' room and sleep between them, something she hadn't done since the day before kindergarten. Mary swore that if she made it out of this place, she would never do anything like this again. All the realization and comfort she had gained from the haunted house had melted like snow on the first warm day of the year, and now she just wanted to feel normal and safe and secure again. She was halfway down the hall when something spoke to her, and she honestly hoped that it wasn't the whistler. It was the voice beneath the monster's voice of every horror movie antagonist. It was the lilting tone of a man who threatens a woman with the most intimate of punishments, and it was the voice that you can only hear in the darkest of your nightmares. When the whistler spoke, it was the sound of creeping dread. "Come out, little one. Come out and let me see you. You've done such a good job of hiding, but our game is over. Now it's time to let me see you before I lose my patience." Mary knew that if that thing caught her, it would do more than take her life. Mary knew that if it caught her, she would cease to be anything like a person. Mary knew that it would make her a casualty in the truest sense of the word. She was against the wall, all of her energy spent trying to stop her knees from shaking, and she wondered what she would do. She couldn't move, and she certainly couldn't fight this thing, so her options seemed to be to give up or continue to hide. She wanted to cry. Crying would do her no good, though. She was capable only of staying still and hoping that it lost interest in her. The footsteps from the other side of the hall grew louder, and the whistling seemed to grow with them. Mary bit her lower lip to stop her teeth from chattering, and hoped it would stop the sob from ripping up her throat. The footsteps got closer, and the whistling was nearly deafening. She sank to her knees as she tried to make herself as small as possible. The whistling was very loud, and the footsteps sounded like they were coming up the dark hallway. When the hands settled around her shoulders, it took her a moment of thrashing to realize they were behind her instead of in front of her. She tried to pull free, but the hands had a firm grip on her as they yanked her backwards into the wall. The plaster that had seemed so solid only a moment before was now as porous as cheesecloth, and Mary slid silently into the wall as the shadow of the Whistler fell across her. He cried out and lunged for her, but Mary was already disappearing into the wall. "You cannot escape me forever," the Whistler promised. Mary didn't know how she had escaped him, but as she turned to see the carnival barker holding his hands up defensively, she realized that she had had help. Jazzy wanted to scream. She wanted to grab hold of her man and pull him to her for whatever time she had left. She wanted to throw herself at the creature that had killed him, but in the end, she could have done none of those things. The metal wire of fear had wrapped itself around her. The metal wire of fear had wrapped itself around her with such force that she could neither move or talk. She just crouched there, gripping onto the young girl as if to protect her from the monstrosity that had snuck up on them. Jazzy had heard of the Corn Man. She and Reggie had heard of him when they were in elementary school, but it had been so long ago that she had never really put any credence to it. The stories were swapped in coat closets, under the slide, and in the dark areas where children often trade dark tales. As she crouched there shivering, she remembered that there had been a second part to the story. The Corn Man would kill you in a grisly fashion, but he could also grant you a wish. There didn't seem to be any sort of rules to these wishes, and Jazzy didn't need the little girl to whisper to her as she clutched her to her chest. "We have to stay still. If we stay still, then he can't hurt us." Jazzy knew this, and as they knelt there in the cornfield, she tried her best not to pass out and get killed on general principle. The Corn Man had let Reggie fall into a pool of his own blood as he stalked around them. Reggie was gurgling pitifully, not quite dead yet, but Jazzy thought he wouldn't last much longer. He had been pierced through the chest in 3 different places, and you didn't just walk away from something like that. The vines had gone through areas that definitely looked important, and even if he survived, there was no way that she could get him out of the field before he bled to death. Reggie would die one way or another, and the only chance was that the Corn Man legend was true. As it leaned down to bring its rotting vegetable face close enough that they could see the bugs crawling over the disgusting surface, Jazzy supposed that there was no real question whether the Corn Man was legit or not. This was no psycho in a costume, no clever bit of makeup, and if he wanted to kill them, it would be all too easy. Reggie had been no small fry, and he had put him down with relative ease. What chance did Jazzy and a little girl have against something like that? As the man she loved bled out his last in the middle of this endless cornfield, Jazzy and the little girl stayed as still as the cornstalks that surrounded them. And finally, the Corn Man was satisfied. "Ye have fulfilled my bargain, and are owed a boon. Tell me, what would you have of the Corn Man?" It took Jazzy a moment to find her voice, and when she spoke, it was barely audible. "I want him," she said, as she pointed at Reggie. "I want him alive, as he was before you killed him." The Corn Man looked down at Reggie, waving a hand at him before growling, "Granted." Then he moved off into the corn, and Jazzy realized that they had been dismissed. She went to Reggie, checking his pulse and finding that he was alive. His wounds had been healed, but there was blood still on the ground. She supposed that Corn Man had done as she asked, and when he gasped and sat up, she hugged him in surprise and joy. She had expected the Corn Man to give her some sort of monkey paw wish, but she supposed he had been true. "What the hell happened?" Reggie asked as he looked around. Did I go to sleep or something? We've got to get out of here, Jazzy said. Something is going on, and we need to find Mary and Mark and get out of here while we still can. Fine by me, Reggie said, as he rubbed a hand across the side of his face. I think I've had enough haunted carnivals for a lifetime. Jazzy helped him up, his legs still a little shaky, and they had taken a few steps before she looked back, remembering the girl. Jazzy glanced around, not sure where the girl had gone to, but when she went to call out to her, she realized the futility. The girl had never given her name, and Jazzy couldn't imagine where she had gotten off to in such a hurry. She looked around frantically, not wanting to leave the girl behind, and when Reggie asked what was wrong, she told him that she had lost track of someone that she had met in the corn. Did you have someone with you? Reggie asked, looking confused. Yes, Jazzy said as she glanced around. It was a little girl. You saw her. She was there when you came out of the corn and fell down, Jazzy corrected, not ready to tell him that he had had a near-death experience. Reggie thought about it before shaking his head slowly. No, when I came out of the corn, it was just you. You were crouched in that spot, talking to yourself, and then I guess I passed out or something, because the next thing I know, I was waking up in the cornfield. No, Jazzy said. No, you had to have seen her. She would have been right. But Jazzy thought she understood then why the little girl had looked so familiar. Jazzy's mother had told her that she needed to grow up, and it seemed that maybe her childhood had come to help her, one last time before she did. Jazz, are you feeling okay, honey? Jazzy nodded, kissing him on the cheek and telling him that she would be okay. They had come back to the track where the tractor had been when they heard a rustling in the corn. Both of them stood still as they could, Jazzy telling him that it might be one of the people that was causing the trouble. In her mind, she thought it was the corn man. Then they could stand still again and he would go away. She didn't care if he gave her another wish. He had already given her the only thing she really wanted at that moment, and she couldn't think of anything else to ask for. When the corn stalks parted, though, it was no hulking monster, but Mark who came stumbling towards them. Thank goodness! I wasn't sure what had happened to you guys. I remembered you said you were going to take a hayride, so when I came across the entrance, I thought maybe you guys had gotten stuck out there. I didn't have a hope that I'd find you, but I'm glad I did. Mark looked a mess. The knee of his jeans was torn, his normally well-groomed hair was hanging raggedly from sweat, and he had what looked like a pumpkin-splattered crowbar over one shoulder. He was out of breath and clearly flustered, but other than that, he didn't look much the worse for wear. That he had been involved in something as strange or terrifying as what the two of them had been involved in, Jazzy had no doubt, though. Have you seen Mary? Jazzy asked, trying not to notice the strangely shy way that Mark was looking at Reggie as he got under one arm. No, or she'd be with me too. She was heading for the ghost house, right? Maybe we should... But the monsters had apparently gotten tired of hiding. Two of the pumpkin heads came out of the fair, and with a whistle and a laugh, they were joined by a man in a tall hat and a long coat. Behind them, the corn man came out of the stalks, but not enough to make Jazzy think he would join them. He would block their escape, she thought, but he would take no part. They were trapped. She followed the barker deeper into the house, and when they came into the little room at the end of the hall, she didn't find what she had expected. She had expected a witch's den, complete with cauldron and ravens and shelves full of spellbooks. What she got was like something out of a Saw movie. It was a dank little brick room with several security cameras showing various angles on the carnival, and a large padded chair that someone could sit in and watch it all unfold. We can wait here until they leave. It'll be all right, don't worry, the barker assured her. Would you like some tea? I've got several different... But she barely heard him. It was Just so strange, all of this, and Mary wasn't quite sure what to make of it. "Where are we?" she finally asked, not sure what to say, so just saying the first thing that came to mind. "It's my safe house. I usually try to have a way out when I can, and a place to hide when I can't." He offered her tea in a chipped cup, and she thanked him as she took it. It was hot and rich, and Mary suspected that it might be actual tea leaves instead of the bag stuff that you often got from the store. She sipped at it as he made his own cup, and when he offered her a seat, she took it. She didn't know why she wasn't more wary of him. He was a stranger, and you were supposed to be careful around strangers, but she felt like he wasn't quite a stranger. Not really. He seemed familiar to her, though they had never actually met, and she found herself thankful that he had saved her from the Whistler. "Who was that anyway?" she asked, watching him as he moved over to the cameras. "Oh, people like me. Well, not people. Not really. They were, once, but they've been changed by him. He comes to them, you see, when they are at their weakest, and offers them things. Freedom, strength, abilities, whatever they're after. What he doesn't tell them is the power is like a collar. They have the power, and it will always belong to them, but they owe him for that power. He can't take it back, but he can hold it over you, and the time is coming when he is calling in his markers, and markers and debt are the currency of his world." "He who?" asked Maria, blowing across the cup before sipping. "The Green Man," he said, breathing it out like he was afraid to say it too loudly. "Who's the Green Man?" "He is from outside our world. He is a spirit of winter, from a place where winter could last for years. He is the Lord of Fall, the grower and the taker of the harvest, the cold one, and he who takes sacrifice. He has power, and he uses it. He is the reason that I can help people at all." Something flashed across the screen for a moment, people running and things running after them, but it went by too fast for Mary to see. "Why would you accept power from something like that? You don't seem like the Whistler. You're the one who helped me, aren't you?" she asked, starting to put it together. When the barker turned around, Mary pulled away a little. His face had become hers. "I got the idea from your mind," he said, grinning, "but yes, it was me." He moved a hand down and across it and was suddenly himself again. "I like to help people, to show them how they're hurting themselves and how they can help themselves. That's why I run my yearly event, so I can help people. All I have ever done is help people. That's how he caught me. He knew my efforts were failing, my funds depleting, and he offered me the ability to help more people than I would ever help in my lifetime with my limited resources. I accepted, of course I did, not knowing what he was, and now he has my number. I've run from him for so long, but this is the closest they have ever actually come to catching me." "What about the people you helped here?" Mary asked, and she felt a little guilty to see him look away, clearly uncomfortable. "Do they get to suffer because these things are after you?" "I feel terrible about that," he said, the steam from his tea lifting into his face, "but there isn't anything I can do. I can't let them have me. I can't help people if I'm under his power." Mary was about to say something, but then the camera buzzed over another scene, and she felt her breath stick in her throat. There they were, Jazzy, Mark, and Reggie, and they were trapped. Mark had a crowbar. He was trying to make a stand as they crept in on him. Reggie looked like he was having trouble standing. Jazzy was looking around fitfully, not sure what to do, and seeming so helpless that it hurt her heart. She stepped closer as something monstrous rose up in the corn behind them, and then it switched over to show another part of the carnival. "I'm sorry," said the barker. "I'd have brought them here too, but I can't risk them finding me." "Isn't there anything you can do?" she said. "They're my friends. I mean, you've been inside my head, so you know how much they mean to me." The barker nodded. "I do. But if I go out there, I might as well give up. They'll overpower me. They'll take me back to him. And Then let me out," Mary said, putting her tea down as she headed up the hall. "Why?" the barker asked, following behind her. "They'll leave once they've finished with everyone. All we have to do is stay put." He followed her down the little hallway, trailing her as she pushed at the walls near where they had come in. "I would rather die with them than live knowing I did nothing. If you've truly been in my head, then you know that. Hell, you were the one that reminded me of how important they are. What's more, if you claim that helping people is your life's work, I don't believe you can sit here and watch them die while you hide." She went right on pushing at the walls for a moment, before a hand fell on her shoulder. "It's funny. I help so many people, but it takes one of you to remind me who I am." Mary looked up, hopeful. "You'll help them?" "Yes, but we'll need to hurry. I might have something that I can do to make this right. Something I should have done from the start. Come on, I know a shortcut." They headed down a hallway that Mary was pretty sure hadn't been there before, and as they ran, she prayed that they would make it in time. "Reggie," Mark said, sounding worried but putting on a brave face, "if you have anything left in the tank, now would be the time to use it." Reggie groaned as he tried to get his feet under him, but he panted as he shook his head. It was taking everything in him just to stand, and he felt like he was just getting over a bad case of the flu. He had no energy, he was weak as a kitten, and he felt terrible that he couldn't protect Jazzy or Mark. Mark gritted his teeth, preparing to lunge at one of the pumpkin heads when they got in close, already knowing that it would be the death of him once they got him. Death would almost be preferable to the tuneless whistling that swarmed around him like bees. The man in the coat had yet to make a move, but all that whistling was like nails on a chalkboard, and Mark felt like it was eroding his sanity the longer it went on. They didn't dare back up too much, the corn man lurking behind them, and they made their peace as they prepared to fight and die. "Stop!" They turned, all of them, and there he was. The barker was standing in the road, Mary beside him, and as he spread his arms wide, the whistler and the pumpkin heads began to stalk towards him. Mary came around him, joining her friends as she moved to Reggie's other side, helping him stand for whatever was to come. "No need for all this. I'll go quietly." "Corn man," he said, turning to the hulking thing as it stood in the field, "is there some way I can cash in your boon before I go?" The corn man came lumbering from the corn, the kids scuttling out of the way as he towered over them. "Ye know that I am unable to use my gifts against those in his service, dear Barker. If it is your intention to escape through use of my favor, then I must refuse." The Barker shook his head. "It is not, though I thank you for your candor. No, I would wish for you to return to life those who fell because of my cowardice this night. Bring back the patrons of my carnival who are gone, and I'll consider it even." The hulking thing seemed to grin as much as it could, and it was strange indeed. A tall order. "Too much to ask?" the Barker said, clearly knowing the answer. "It is done," the corn man said with a sigh. "Now, as you promised, it is time to go." "Unless you'd rather run," the whistler said, the glee evident. "Then we could just See how many of these people we can kill again before we caught you." "There will be no need for that," the barker said as he spread his hands. "Let's go. I wouldn't want to keep His Highness waiting." The Pumpkinhead bristled at that. "We will suffer no slight against the Winter Lord. You are his vassal, as we are, and you will accord him the proper respect." "Are we going or not?" the barker asked, allowing them to take an arm each as the 5 of them disappeared into the fog that had suddenly risen around them. "My friends," he called back, his voice easily reaching the group that sat shivering amidst the fog, "I do hope you have enjoyed this year's festivities. I pray I may count you amongst my satisfied customers, and that I will see you again some Halloween night." When the fog parted, the group was left staring at a blank stretch of dirt, the monsters having gone with the mist. They called it the Fern Island Incident, and it was the talk of the town for years to come. The police were called after dozens of people awoke from a shared dream about being killed at a carnival that had been taking place there. They all talked about pumpkin-headed vandals, a giant corn creature, and a man in a long coat with terrible whistles. They all talked about a carnival barker, but not as often. All of them were weak, disoriented, and not quite sure what had happened. The hospital that treated the majority of them labeled the incident as a incident of group hysteria, but they couldn't find a cause. There were some patients with alcohol in their system, but not enough to have made them hallucinate. There were some patients with drugs in their system, but nothing harder than one man who had snorted a little cocaine. The truth was that no one knew why they were like this. No one but 4 18-year-olds who did not go to the hospital and did not talk to the police. They slunk off like thieves in the night, aware that they had witnessed something unexplainable. "Well," Mark said as he drove them home, "no one's ever going to believe this." "Who cares?" Mary said. "We believe it. That's enough for me." Jazzy sat in the back seat with Reggie, who was snoring. He had made it to the car with the help of all 3 of them and had collapsed in the back seat before crashing out. She noticed Mark glancing at him in the rearview mirror, and she could see real worry there. It made her glad. Mark was such a good friend to worry about him. "I'll stay with him tonight," Jazzy said. "I'll tell his parents that something happened and he's not feeling well." "Good idea," Mark said. He sounded strange, though, as he said it. It was something they would talk about over the years, their harrowing time on Fern Island, and it kept them close. Though they drifted some in the years after high school, the 4 always came back together at least once a year for scary movies, candy, and remembrance of a night when they had been very, very lucky. You're still here. Thanks for stopping by. Dr. Plague here. Always a pleasure to see all my new and old viewers coming by for another one of my spooky tales. If you'd like to support the show, you can always take part in one of our channel offers through Fume or Aura, or you can just click on another video when they come up. I'd really appreciate it. For our newer viewers, we also have lots of playlists and other things if you'd like to get caught up. I know some of my series have been going on for quite a while. If you'd like to get my latest book, there's a link down below that'll take you to my Amazon page. Towesey Homestead just came out, so if that's something you'd like to get your hands on, go ahead and have a look down there. If you'd like a signed copy, you can go ahead and email me from my email address on the site, and I'll get with you about shipping information and ship you a signed copy. If you'd like to support the channel in a more monetary fashion, we also have membership through YouTube, and we've got a Patreon that you can get the information for in the description. We have lots of tiers and everything to suit your needs. Patrons that support on the $10 tier, that's our Ghostly Reader tier, get a book anytime I write one, signed and on their doorstep. As you may have noticed, there's a list of patrons and members on the screen, and I'd like to personally thank every one of them for taking a hand in the future of this channel. Well, that's enough for tonight. Dr. Plague, signing off. Have a wonderful evening.